Hello, this is Dr. Adam J. Bach. In this short audio presentation, we're going to begin the conversation about product and service development in the context of technology entrepreneurship. We're going to begin that conversation by talking about creativity, and from there focus on the specific product service development topics. Please note that there are two audio presentations that we're going to be doing here, and there's also going to be a series of online activities that you'll need to complete that normally we would do in the classroom. We want to begin this conversation by talking about creativity. Any product or service innovation begins with a creative moment where someone says, I wonder if we could do things a little bit differently. So I wanted to start with a definition, which I just pulled from the Cambridge Dictionary Online, which is the ability to produce original and unusual ideas or to make something new or imaginative. And I think all of us are familiar with creativity and have some ideas about how creativity actually happens. And I believe personally that everyone has creative capabilities. Obviously, some people more than others. Some people are faster with creativity, some are slower. Some people are have their creativity in very focused areas. Some people may have a more broad range of creative capabilities. But for the moment, what I want you to do is to think about someone you know personally. That is, someone that you've known in your life, not someone that you've heard about on TV or someone like Steve Jobs, but someone you know personally that you feel is especially creative. And I want you to keep that person in mind as we go through the rest of this conversation. I'll be asking you to put that information into an online form a little bit later on. And in particular, I want you to think about what it is about that person, that their behavior or the things they've done in the past or their characteristics that lead you to think that they're especially creative. So I want you to think about that for just a moment. I'm going to pause and then we'll continue on with this conversation. There's an important difference between individual creativity and organizational innovation. Imagine for a moment taking that one person that you know who's so creative and putting that person in a room with 3 or 4 other really, really creative people. Maybe those are other creative people you know, or maybe we're just sort of agreeing that these are all very creative people and we put them in a room together. Now, imagine that we gave them a hard deadline. Like you have 4 hours and you have to come up with a new set of products and services to grow our business and help it be more profitable. I want you to imagine what would actually happen in that room as those people attempted to address this question and this particular challenge. And again, I'm going to give you a moment to just kind of ponder what you think would happen in that room. And again, I'm going to be asking you to put those thoughts into an online form a little bit later on. So if you want to take a moment to jot those notes down real quickly, that's great. Obviously, I'm sure you can come up with them later when you're ready to do the online form. But I'll pause for just a moment and then we'll move on to the next elements of this conversation. This distinction between individual creativity and organizational innovation is extremely important. Your book talks about this perspective of an innovation engine, sort of this framework in which an organization becomes innovative over time. And that's distinct from any one person's creativity. This framework identifies 6 elements: culture, resources, habitat, which really means sort of the context that the organization functions in, and then attitude, knowledge, and imagination. And the first 3 are really sort of organizational in nature: the culture of the organization, the resources that are available, the context in which it functions. And then the other 3 tend to be a little more specific to individuals: the attitude they have, the knowledge they bring to the table, and the imagination that they have. Clearly, those 3 are affected by the organizational factors. Any of this to function in and to generate innovation probably has to begin with some kind of creative act, usually something like brainstorming. And my guess is you've done some brainstorming in the past. Hopefully you've had some experience with it. We're going to use a modified version of that as you get to the end of this presentation to input information into the online form. And I want to give you some guidelines and rules for thinking about how to do effective brainstorming. Remember here, we're not trying to identify our perfect product or service. We're trying to start at a point where we're open to all sorts of ideas. This is what it means to be entrepreneurial rather than to be purely managerial. So for example, IDEO has come up with a series of brainstorming rules, which are really very powerful, and I use these in almost all my brainstorming sessions. deferring judgment. That is, when you're doing brainstorming, don't criticize. Don't say, no, that's stupid. Don't say, well, that's never going to work, right? Start with every idea and write every idea down. Capture them all, because even really bad ideas or impossible ideas can be the basis for other ideas. Writing them down gives you the opportunity to do something, to come up with something better. It's good to encourage wild ideas. So really, in the assignment you're going to do when you fill out the form, I've asked you, for example, not to come up with ideas like a teleporter, right? Because we just know physically there's no physics that supports that. But it's okay to have ideas that seem kind of crazy at the start. If you were doing this with a group of other people, it would be really important to stick to one conversation at a time. If someone comes up with an idea and there's people are building off of it, let that play out before you leap in with something completely different. It's fair game to build on other people's ideas. In a pure brainstorming session, there's no ownership, right, if you're working in a group. And so if someone comes up with an idea and you immediately have a better version of it, that's fair game. Say it, get it written down, and move on. Again, if you were doing this with a group, or in our classroom, I'd be encouraging you to be visual, come up with pictures, diagrams, not just the specific words. And the bottom line is volume, right? At this stage of the game, you want to come up with as many as you can, as quickly as you can. Don't worry that some of them are not going to work or don't make a lot of sense. So, how quickly can you come up with 10 innovations? I want you to pause this at the end of my sentence and come up with one, right? Just really quickly. An innovation, something could be an opportunity for a business or a product or a service. Come up with one. For the form, you're going to have to come up with 10. So good to come up with one right now. A good way to start, if you just kind of feel blank, is what's something that's happened in my life in the last week or two where there's a product or service that I've not seen before that could have made my life just slightly better, okay? It might have been a little weird or a little crazy, but come up with one thing. So I'm going to pause for a moment. You pause this audio presentation. Come up with one. It really makes a difference if you do one right now. It'll prepare you for completing the form a little bit later. How useful is the process of coming up with innovations in this sort of brainstorm manner, especially if you're working with a group of other people like yourself? Imagine we did this in a classroom and I required you to come up with 25 of these in 10 minutes, right? Well, the good is you'd probably have some really interesting ideas. It would go really, really quick. It's kind of low risk, right? Because we know that we're accepting right off the bat that some of these are going to be bad. We don't attach names to them. And it encourages fast failure because we can get an awful lot of ideas out there, and then later on we can quickly walk through them and say, these aren't going to work, these aren't going to work, these aren't going to work. There are some, drawbacks to this. A lot of what we come up with is going to be worthless, right? 80–90% of these ideas probably don't make any sense. There's probably going to be a homogeneity problem because you're working with people you know and are familiar with, whether they're students or coworkers. Many of the ideas are probably going to be the same because you face the same problems on a day-to-day basis. The set of ideas will be limited by your experience and circumstances. And that means that if everybody kind of has similar circumstances because you're all students or you all work for the same company, the ideas will probably have a lot of similarity to them. And even though we want to treat this in a low-risk situation and encourage fast failure, it's still very easy to get emotionally attached to your own idea. The intent of this process is to prevent that, right? To encourage a group sense of we all own this and we're all working on this together, but people do still get emotionally attached. Would you be willing to share your really crazy ideas in a group session? If you think about this, when you do this later on for yourself, think about how crazy some of the ideas that you come up with are, and would you be willing to share them? And then would you be able to limit your judgment of other students' ideas? This is a good opportunity to think about how effective you would be in brainstorming and to try to recognize that the value of the brainstorming process is to focus on the benefit to the group or the organization, not your own benefit. Part of this is getting to a point where we can do associational thinking, right? So that's where we're applying sort of a critical thinking perspective to product and service generation, where we start with sort of this wild, open-ended brainstorming process where almost anything is fair game. But then we begin to incorporate these other elements in order to try to identify where the real opportunities are. So once we've gotten all the ideas out there, then we can begin questioning observing, networking, and testing and experimenting. And I encourage you to take a look in the textbook to understand a little more about this and to recognize this distinction between the innovation component of it and getting to the point where we have something that's actually workable and that we can experiment with to see if it's likely to be a successful product or service. I'm going to show you a very short clip from a talk given by David Friedberg at Stanford about recognizing opportunities in the rain. This clip's, I think it's just about 4 or 5 minutes long. It's one of my favorite short talks ever about recognizing opportunity. When you're all done with this and you go into Canvas, you'll see there's a link to a series of videos, including this one. They're all relatively short. It's probably about 18, 19 minutes total. But I want you to watch those because then there's a short quiz that you're going to take in Canvas to kind of think about what actually happened in this situation, because I think that this is one of the great examples of thinking about getting from idea to reality.
So let me tell you the story. In 2002, I used to drive past the down the Embarcadero to get on the 280 to go to work, to get on the 280 and the 101 to go to work in Foster City. And I used to drive past this place called the Bike Hut. It's right next to AT&T Park on the Embarcadero. And they rent bicycles to tourists and they ride them around on the waterfront. And at the time, when I was doing investment banking, I was learning about finance and I was learning about business and how, managers think about their P&L and their operating and their income statements and so on. And every day it was raining, the Bike Hut would be closed. So the guy wouldn't even come in and open up shop because tourists aren't renting bikes and riding around in the rain. So the dude didn't even show up to work. And I thought, that's a pretty crappy business. Like, whether or not this guy is going to make money in a given month is based on how many days it rains. And so you start to think, well, that's actually a big problem. You ever go to the movie theater on a Sunday when it's raining? There's like so many people in the movie theater. And the coffee shops are packed when it's raining. No one goes to the ski resorts when it's warm and it hasn't snowed. So like, you start to think about it, and it turns out that, and I love this statistic, this is our big number, the 70% of businesses are affected by the weather every year. So years later, when I was at Google, I came back to this idea about sort of, all the world's businesses affected by the weather. Maybe there's something they can do about it. And we can sell coverage to pay them if bad weather happens, making it easier for them to run and manage their businesses. 70% of the world's businesses, $4 trillion of the GDP in the United States each year. And at the time, I was working at Google, working on AdWords. And this idea of sort of taking lots of data and being able to extract signal from it and determine some sort of fee or charge that one would make to a customer, in the case of Google advertisers, could apply here. We could analyze weather data. We could determine the probability of future weather events occurring. And we could sell you coverage that would pay you if bad weather were to happen to your business. And so if you know that the bad weather is going to cause a loss of $100, well, then you want to get paid $100 when that bad weather happens. And so we'll give you a price to cover that because we will be able to figure out the probability of that event occurring, and we will charge you an appropriate charge to cover you. And there's no claims process or proof of loss because we can monitor the weather. There's all these data feeds available now. So choose a weather station where we have a data feed, and we'll monitor the weather automatically, and we'll trigger a check to you if it happens.
So having now come up with one idea, and in the activity online you're going to do, you're going to think of 10. Then you're going to try to think about how to take an idea to the next level, right? So Friedberg talked about kind of how he came up with the idea and where his prior expertise led to that. In your case, what I want you to do is once you've come up with the 10 ideas in the Google form, you're going to pick one of them, and you're going to answer a couple questions about how could you figure out whether or not there was something really there. So please use this opportunity now, watch the David Friedberg videos, take the quiz, complete the Google form, and then when all of that is ready, you can go on to part 2. I know that some of you are going to be inclined to just go immediately and watch listen to the second audio presentation. Can't stop you from doing that, but I am telling you right now, you are going to get a lot more out of this if you go through the activities first and then come back to do the second audio presentation.